Another live episode of Teachers for Teachers. I'm Dr. Haynes, and we're happy to have another show. Hello, Dr. Leah.
Hello, Dr. Dejana. So good to see you. Should we go ahead and introduce our guest today, Dejana?
Absolutely. I'm so excited. I can't wait to share this with you all. We have a very, very, very special guest today, Dr. Loren Hill. Dr. Loren Hill has been active in numerous projects that include working with at risk youth in several regions across California. One of those regions happens to be Gardena, California, which is the home of our headquarters, offices, and warehouse. So we're really excited that we are kind of homegrown for us here in Gardena, California. Also, Dr. Hill has been involved in the Society of STEM, Women of Color, and the Los Angeles and Adolescent Suicide Review Team. We want to talk to her about her work in STEM and how she views the emotional health of children during this pandemic. I'd also like to introduce our panel. We're so happy to have them. They add so much to our conversation. Let's first introduce and say hello to Tim. Tim Griffin, say hello.
You're
Tim
muted.
is a regular with us, and he is a retired STEM teacher, an award winning singer, songwriter, and storyteller, and the founding director of Griffin Ed, an amazing nonprofit team of educators and musicians dedicated to raising academic achievement in STEM and other subjects through fun educational music. We're happy to have him join our conversation. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Marcella Kine Williams. Go ahead and say hello.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you, an accomplished leader in education and well known both in formal and informal learning environments. Dr. Williams is a frequent speaker on issues of equity, and she's currently the STEM director of Oxnard College. We got a great team here, Dr. Leah.
We do, don't we? So we should have Dr. Hill say hello to the group, and we'll have you on camera for a minute. It wouldn't be a Zoom if someone weren't muted when they said hi, which I think happened to Tim. But Dr. Hill, we're so excited to have you join us, and I know you spend most of your current academic or current career with academics in higher ed, helping them with promotions and navigating that world. Today, I think we want to talk more about some of your past experiences. I also understand you were involved in a charter school, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about that experience.
Sure. Thanks so much, everybody, for having me. It's my pleasure to be with such a distinguished group of educators and people who are just go-getters. I love the energy. I love the mission. I think this is just so awesome. So, Dr. Leah is correct. I primarily work with folks who are trying to go into higher education or higher ed, post-secondary, and also those who already are in and are looking to promote. And so I'll just say a few more things about that because I think it's totally relevant to the conversation. I was in higher ed, or I've been in higher ed for over 25 years now. And I started off as, I like to say, I started off as a TA. And so I've been a TA, I've been adjunct faculty, I've been core faculty, I was a department chair, program chair. So I've had faculty positions and admin positions. And during my time in academia, one of the things that I noticed was that it really mirrored my graduate experience. So there were few people of color, fewer women. My PhD is in clinical psychology, and there's a term of like the feminization of psychology because sometimes psychology is considered a soft science, which is so funny to me because I don't think that my stats class or stats professor or my methodology was soft in any way at all. So as I went through, my own graduate experience and then continued on in the faculty and administrative side, I again noticed that it wasn't that diverse, right? But we also know that academia wasn't really meant to be diverse, and that could be a whole nother panel. But if you start to trace back to K through 12, and how girls and boys are sort of socialized or not socialized around the sciences, hard or soft. Um, I started to think, okay, my colleagues really are working hard at the K through 12 area, but I don't know anyone, at least in my circle, who's been able to work hard at the post secondary level of create and increasing diversity, right? So we all know that, folks may go into academia and they might experience burnout or lack of support or not know how to navigate the system of how to promote or how to even start an adjunct position. So that's how I started my academic coaching business. Now, then I thought, okay, I really need to continue to connect because education is a continuum, right? So I set about looking into joining boards for charter schools or, how to really educate myself on that foundational piece. And that is how I came to work with the programs in Gardena and West Los Angeles. I was on a STEM charter school board, and I was eventually elected president. There's a sad ending to this tale because when our students started doing very well, the school district said, we kind of like those students. So we felt like there was some, like this political drive to kind of shut us down. And that's another conversation too. So we had these kids who were, from inner cities. They were ethnic minorities. They didn't really fit in their home school because their home schools were so large. And when they came to our charter school, they moved from surviving to thriving. And so we were so happy at about some of their accomplishments. They were able to build robots, and they won some awards at different competitions. So we fought really hard because we know that when children are engaged with STEM and STEAM, then that also reflects in terms of their mental well-being, their self-esteem. They see another way to kind of cope. It builds critical thinking skills, and those foundational skills early in life can literally change the trajectory of where a child may go. So you can see that I can be a bit verbose and excited when I start talking about STEM and STEAM throughout the, educational continuum, whether it's the little ones all the way up to, the big kids or even the faculty. So I'll stop there, and I could go on and on, but I won't.
Got it. Got it. One thing that just stood out to me right now is I feel like you are a ally and colleague in the struggle to create more diverse and equitable spaces within STEM, whether that was in the K-12 environment or, as you say, in the higher ed environment. One thing that I'm curious about that you said in your charter school, you were able to observe students go from surviving to thriving. And I'm actually currently reading a book. It's called Abolitionist Teaching. We want to do more than just survive by Dr. Bettina Love. And she goes into detail about this complex in schools and how a lot of specifically BIPOC children, Black, Indigenous, people of color, their children are surviving in the school system. And she goes through strategies on what we can do to change. I wonder what does that look like in higher ed? Like you said, a lot of focus and a lot of work and research and studies, even money and funding have been put into looking at that issue in K-12. But what does that look like in higher ed? I have my PhD in marine science, and I was the only Black person in my entire department. I was the only Black person in the entire life sciences realm while I was there, and it's just kind of interesting. I have a lot to say about it, but I want to hear from you. What are your observations on what can be done on that front since you kind of started your whole business looking at that problem?
So it's a huge problem, right? And as you mentioned, there appears to be a lot of money put behind, research or programs, and oftentimes it's been my experience, whether involved personally or anecdotally, and even reading the literature, is that someone will have a great idea and they'll have a great heart and they have money to get a program going. And for a number of complex variables, it may not last beyond 2 to 5 years. And so part of that has to do with, as you were mentioning, BIPOC individuals going to school and they're barely surviving, right? So there's a whole nother population who aren't going to school. And if they are going to school, they're completely overwhelmed. They are, living in food deserts, all of these things that will impede someone, a child, learning, right? We know that how their mind is developing, they have to eat, they have to get enough sleep, they have to be focused. And so I was re-listening to a podcast series with Malcolm Gladwell called Revisionist History just this past week. It's so ironic because he did a 3-part series on children and who were in impoverished or inner city, and they're not always the same, but these kids were ethnic minorities, racial and ethnic minorities. And he talked about a funder who was like, I know there's got to be, in this case, Black and brown kids out there who are smart, right? So the strategy when they started unpacking it was backwards, right? So they were looking at college admissions officers and recruiters, and they were saying, "We can't find these kids. We put out all these fillers, and no ethnic minorities are coming in." It's like, oh, really? So you're telling me that you want a kid from Gardena or a kid from South LA or a kid from South Side of Chicago to come to your campus to fill out an application for a college? Are you like, as the kids will say, miss me with that, right? So how are you going to go to them to support them? Well, what they later found out was by the time they're going to turn in their college exams or applications, it's too late. They need to be starting with those kids by 4th grade. And those of us who are familiar with, you know, um, ed psychology, know that that is a crucial time because, the foundations, the reading, the writing, how you think about math or how you put words together. And we can even go further back. My specialty in my private practice is neurodevelopmental psychology. So I'm assessing for, disabilities from learning disabilities, autism, speech and language, etc. And the youngest child that I see is like under 2 years old. So now we're talking about, well, 4th grade and what happens there and how you have to start in 4th grade. No, 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 no. You have to start before that. So by the time you get to college, the reason that you're not seeing some of these children going to campus and or getting a scholarship, because people, we hear all the time about so and so is putting together scholarships for racial and ethnic minorities, and they're not taking advantage of it. So now we're victim blaming and we're not matching resources. So I think that there's so many variables. All of us have advanced degrees, so we know about variables and research and all that. But at what I felt like I could do was try to reach individuals, because I'm not a billionaire yet. And even if I were, my approach and strategy would be informed by my experience and what I know to be true. We all know that, there's evidence-based strategies and programs, but sometimes that doesn't work,
Right.
right? We have to meet the kids where they are. And part of my strategy is to be present at the higher ed level, right? So when kids come in and they're, I was department chair, I would be like, look, if, mom, do you want me to call you if you want to, like, I get FERPA and all that, but sometimes when you're dealing with collective societies, right, they want to be part of it. So how do we assist the family unit and the social support and respect the cultural underpinnings and overlays that will help that child make it? Maybe they'll be the first. We see so many times the kids will stop out or drop out only to find out that their parents are like, well, we need you to work, or, we don't, you got to take care of your baby brother. So, anyway, again, I could go on and on about this, but there's just a lot, right? There's a lot.
What does that look like starting with the little ones? Like how do you where do we start with that? And I'm sorry, Tim, I saw you have a question too, so
It's okay.
we'll go to you next.
Yeah, so I think that there's no one answer, but one of the ways in which I start is that when families are referred to me, whether it's through the school district or through the regional center, and they come to my office, I have an office in Baldwin Hills, California, and it's right in a shopping square. And they're like, when they come in, they're like, you're the doctor? And I'm like, yes, I am the doctor. And so exposure, right? So the first time a little one, a 2-year old or a 4-year old sees me and I, get down eye to eye with them. And I'm like, have you ever seen a doctor like me? And they're like, no. And sometimes, I may have my braids, or I'll have some, something. I'm not wearing a Brooks Brothers suit, obviously, because why would I do that with a 2-year old? But they are, their eyes are like big as teacups because they're like, oh, like you're the real doctor, like you're not the assistant. And even the families, the parents. And so that's one entry point. The other entry point is oftentimes when I have my assessment with my families, I take extra time to listen to them, right? Because we also know that many times people of color feel like, rightfully so, the doctor is like this, right? No eye contact, just checking off. Okay, fine, on to the next one. So it could be that I'm just talking to them. Now, these things that I do transferable, right? I did it when I was in academia. I did it when I was a faculty member. I did it when I was a department chair. Listening matters. Showing up matters. Being available so that they can, sort of figuratively reach out and touch you. Because if they don't have anyone in their proximity, then they don't know that it's attainable. They don't know that they could be a doctor. They don't know they could be a statistician. They don't know. So that's one piece of it. And then my interns and then my team and my colleagues are very diverse. So we're talking men, women, Caucasian, ethnic minorities. Like, I want these kids to see everybody, and I want to see them see us work together, because then we don't have them thinking, oh, it's us against them, or we can't collaborate, that I would never work with Tim because, he's a guy, and, it's to the exclusion of. And so I feel like there's always room enough at the table for everyone. And even if we have to scoot our chair over a little bit and invite the person in, let's just do it.
Yeah.
I love that. Tim.
One thing you mentioned earlier that I wanted to hear a little more about was the continuity from the elementary to high school to college. Because if you're going to be addressing the issue at the college level, it seems to me a big part of the challenge is you can go to the high schools, but I've been to high schools in neighborhoods that were 60% Latino, and there might be 5% Latino makeup in the STEM classes at the high school level. And so it was a big revelation for me when I met Jeffrey Canada, who runs the Harlan Children's Zone, where they actually recruit parents to the project. They buy data from supermarkets about who's buying diapers and things. So they make contact. Their goal is to make their initial contact while the mom is still expecting, and they track the child, and they are in the program, from one year to the next, all the way through college. And they've had huge success, but it's just so darn labor intensive. And I think about all my years in the classroom when we go to staff meetings. If I'm teaching third grade, who do I sit with? The other third grade teachers. So how do we make sure that that there are going to be enough of those kids in the pipeline so that by the time they're ready for your intervention, there are enough of them that we're not having to hunt behind every tree to find people who are not white guys and Asian American guys who are into STEM.
Yeah, so love Jeffrey Canada's work. Like, I'm always amazed at these great programs that you're like, yes, somebody got it right. Now, why isn't it replicated, right? And so, as we all know, because we've done research and we've been in the classrooms at various levels, the when you're implementing something, you're right, it is labor intensive. So that's the front load work, right? So you got to have skin in the game, you got to be dedicated. And I kind of shrug my shoulders because I think the past few years have brought to light a lot of disparities, right? So if you have ethnic children of color who are, they're disenfranchised, they're in areas where, it's stress, there's food deserts, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so you got to put in some more work to help that baby make it to college, right? Because now we're investing. And there's a really, Kimberly Crenshaw has this theory about, like the time of how some people benefited from time and investments, right? So and it's illustrated by this running around the track, right? So there's these obstacles that specifically with, I would keep wanting to call her Dr. Crenshaw, but she's an attorney, who, Black people at every corner, they're either tripping over rocks or they're being eaten by snakes or they can't get a house over here. All of these things are impediments. So I think, oh, well, if we have to invest in these children now to help them have a chance, that is what we owe them. And, we can't tap out. We also have to engage with each other. Like you mentioned, Tim, who do you sit with? Third grade teachers. Like I was over a forensic department. Who do we sit with? The forensic psychologists, right? Heaven forbid we're with those org psych people, because what do they know about anything? Mm-hmm. So mixing in the lunchroom, mixing in the classroom. One of the things that I continue to do is guest lecture, right? And hey, I'm busy. I have a full life. I have a thriving practice. I have employees. I'm constantly getting recruited to, work at the higher ed level. And I have to be selective about it, but I can't say no. I just can't.
I love that. And I can see that in you. I actually would like to bring Dr. Klein Williams, Marcella, into the conversation, and we're getting very low on time. So,
Yeah.
Marcella.
Yeah, Dr. Hill, it's so good to hear a lot of the things that you're saying. As a STEM director at Oxnard College, we've done a lot of work in the way in cascading mentoring. So as a steward, I have a mentor and I have those that are mentees that I work directly with. But any person, student or otherwise, they have that same expectation that they're being mentored and they're working with mentees. So that's one of the ways we help bolster representation as we're looking for those changes to be reflected in the faculty and the rest of the folks around them. What are your thoughts on kind of mentoring as a part of the solution?
Oh, I love it. So, what I didn't know, and if it's okay with you, Dr. Marcella, I'm going to take that term, cascading mentoring,
All
because
right.
I actually, that's part of my philosophy as well. And when I am coaching, I tell my, clients, like, you need to have a level up. And since someone's pouring into you, you need to have a level below you so that it's this continuous. So I love that term. I would, if with your permission, I will continue to use it.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
this is it's a must. And so I also have expanded out my idea about mentoring. Actually, my doctoral dissertation had some components of mentoring in it because we know that mentoring can at times be the single thing that changes the trajectory of the child's life, even when a child may have been through some trauma or some horrific home. If they have a teacher who is like, I see you and I know you can, they will sort of internalize that message, and it will buffer against the other things. So you plant the seed. We all know the research around teachers and children. You can, you can't, the brown eyes, the blue eyes, it's like it can happen in an instant, right? So if we lean towards the you can, then it will happen. And so I think also building out so that you have, a sponsor, someone who can advocate for you, a coach, someone who can cheer you on, because all these roles are different. And I recently wrote a blog about that. And so I think that that works in any environment at any age.
Such an
Awesome. Thank you
important
so
point.
much.
Dejana, are you?
I'm here taking all these notes and stuff. I have loads of questions, but I'm also looking at the time, like, oh, I want to monopolize the time right here. I think it would be great for our viewers, just the last couple of minutes right here, to zoom in on higher ed, because we've got, Dr. Marcella Klein Williams working in the higher ed, and, we've gone through higher education and kind of what some of these challenges are in terms of higher ed. And I know when I went to get my PhD, I wish I would have had an academic coach to help me navigate that as a young woman of color in a STEM field, 100%. And I thought we could end it with just some tips for survival, because I know there are a lot of young women that are in their, master's, graduate programs, or even as undergrads. And they made it great. They survived, they thrived, they got it, they made it there. But how do you stay? So, what type of tips, I guess, in 60 seconds, tips for like sticking with STEM? What do you need to equip yourself with to be successful in your continued journey in STEM ed?
You need a team. You need some first aid. You're going to endure some challenges. And so there's sometimes where you can put your own band-aid in, and there's sometimes where you need somebody to give you tea and sympathy.
I like it. You need a
Such
team,
good
you need your
point.
first aid kit. That's a great way to to wrap it up. We can do this. We
It
can
is.
do this together. Oh my gosh, I really wish we could continue this conversation. You'll probably hear from me sometime in the near future. But honestly, we are out of time, and that is another, like, that's a wrap for another wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Hill, for joining us and sharing. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you to our panel, Dr. Marcella Klein Williams, Tim Griffin, always a pleasure to have you. Leah, what can I say? Is that a wrap?
It is a wrap. Thank you, everybody. What a great show.
Awesome. Stay strong, and we'll see you next time.